We do not rebuild the past. We answer the question it, left been it, left to abide. Starborne Codex.
Starborne Codex, Echoes of Alzenoria. Volume 1, Act 1, The Awakening of Zenoria. In the furthest stretch of the Zenla Galaxy, where gravitational tides stir nebulous oceans and starlight bleeds across eons, there lies a subregion whose name is known to only the most patient of archivists and the most ancient of machines, Zenoria. Long before the stars of Kent had kindled their mighty fleets, before the crystalline data scrolls of Tizen had been inscribed with the laws of Zibunubi, even before the name civilization had meaning in the cosmic tongue, Zenoria hummed with life, raw, untamed, and eternal. From this dark womb of the void came the Alzenorians. They were not born as we understand the term. Rather, they were assembled, consciousness forged from stellar particles, woven in labyrinthine gestation chambers of orbital moons, and awakened by harmonics drawn from the gravity wells of dying suns. Theirs was a genesis that defied replication, and with it came a destiny none could deny. They rose not from one world, but many. Zimet, jewel of the Alzenorian heart worlds, would become their beacon, its temples hewn from frozen time, its atmosphere laced with the scent of neutron rain. From this world emanated faith, law, and prophecy. Nearby, the planet Eisen shimmered with the glow of ancient forges, crafting the first stellar alloys that would shield their ships from the wrath of the void. Gnosis, enigmatic and proud, became the cradle of knowledge, storing philosophies and astral geometries within crystalline libraries that pulsed with light. These were not isolated worlds. They were limbs of one body bound in a union of purpose and ambition, each planet governed by its Zurtat, or sometimes by a noble Zinlat, terms whispered with reverence and trepidation in equal measure. At the zenith of their early age, sometime near what the oldest orbital relays record as 1 C.7, the Alzenorians crafted the unimaginable, Alzenos, floating cities, the size of continents, anchored by gravitic spires and tethered to the fabric of local space-time. Here, scholars debated the nature of causality beside starfarers, returning from the edge of the known. Here, priests walked beside engineers, and quantum cuneiform was chiseled into living metals by hands older than stars. And yet, they were not alone. From the shadowed past came Lanumi, the once great cradle of civilization. Its ruins, veiled in dust and myth, had long been whispered of by the children of Elam, an enigmatic progenitor whose journey through the stars, accompanied by 5 divine offspring, laid the spiritual bedrock of 4 major Zenla religions. The Alzenorians did not ignore these tales. Instead, they hunted them. Alfinu Eruk, called Seeker of Forgotten Sons, led the first great expedition into Lanumi's dead orbit. His ship, crafted from layered gravitanium and vortexium, passed undetected through void storms and time distortions until it arrived above the frozen bones of an empire long extinguished. What he found reshaped Alzenorian identity forever. There, beneath the glass-like crust of Lanumi's tomb world, Eruk's team uncovered hundreds of vessels, colossal, radiant, and bristling with technology so advanced they defied reverse engineering. One such ship, dubbed the Zela's Wrath, bore weapon systems capable of vaporizing moons from across parsecs, and yet it lay dormant, its command chamber still echoing with cuneiform that told of mourning, exile, and end-time prophecy. What else did they find? Massive sarcophagi containing the remains of Lanumian monarchs, adorned with obsidian corosteel armor and robes woven from temporal strands, codices bound in chronotite, astral cartographs etched by the hand of Alik Tura, who, even in this era, began charting wormholes through psychic resonance. And amidst the wreckage, the unshattered database of a high priest. Its entries whispered of a singular warning. All that grows beyond the reach of humility shall wither in cosmic silence. The expedition returned not as mere researchers, but as pilgrims. And with them, the age of simple expansion ended. A new purpose took hold. From the fragments of Lanumi, the Alzenorians adopted both awe and arrogance. Their technologies blossomed at impossible speeds. Starforge alloy was outmoded. New dreadnoughts were clad in zenthrosite, a material so dense and ancient it could withstand the death throes of black holes. Dusk steel found its way into espionage craft. Chronotite sheathed the hulls of their command stations, allowing them to rewind critical damage by mere seconds and cheat the edge of destruction. The Confederacy formalized soon after, binding the worlds of Zimit, Elzina, Eisen, Gnosis, and Ion into the first true interplanetary polity of the Lyria region. They were not conquerors, not yet. They were students of the stars, archivers of the past, and heralds of a future that even the Zenla Galaxy itself seemed to pause for. But beneath the rising towers of alloy and crystal, beneath the songs of logic and light, lay a silence. It was ancient, watching, and it did not smile. Act 2, The Zenith and the Veil. The Alzenorians stood for a time as the uncontested titans of Zenoria. From the trade corridors of the Harslir Pass to the deep signal channels of the Zunlir web, their names shimmered like a blade of light across the star charts. No civilization, neither the Repson explorers of the deep, nor the surviving technocrats of Lanumi's twilight, matched the speed of their advancement or the elegance of their cosmic design. Their capital, the space station of Alzenoria, orbited the twin suns of the Zunitri system, a radiant nexus pulsing with diplomacy, art, and encoded prophecy. Alzenoria itself was a marvel beyond mortal comparison. Entire districts hovered in place, suspended by gravity wave lattices. Colossal towers shifted orientation with the planet's axial spin. And deep beneath the diplomatic atriums and sky bazaars, hidden within unlit corridors of crystalline circuitry, slept a chamber known only to the ruling council, the Quantum Choir. Here, the greatest minds of Alzenoria, fused with AI matrices and bound within Ethereum thrones, communed not only with each other, but allegedly with the fabric of time itself. It was in this chamber that a transmission once arrived from a far-flung vessel, presumed lost beyond the Edge Nebula. The message, fragmented but intelligible, repeated a single line. "We have seen the veil. The stars speak lies." It was dismissed at first as artifact corruption, but that message would come to haunt the Alzenorian elite. For outside the cathedrals of power and thought, something subtle stirred. The temple scribes of Zimmit, keepers of ancient cosmic religions derived from the teachings of Elam and his divine progeny, began seeing signs in the light patterns of pulsars. They whispered of aberrations in ritual cycles, disturbances in gravitational harmonics, and dreams shared between planets. In these visions, black tendrils of void crept through the corridors of space. Motherships drifted without light. Echoes of 1,000 voices screamed from behind wormhole gates, and at the center of it all, a presence, ancient, patient, smiling with teeth that sang entropy into being. They were visions of the fleets of the dark void, an entity, or species, or phenomenon that defied Alzenorian understanding. It was not invasion, for they did not conquer. It was not diplomacy, for they did not speak. They simply passed through, and chaos bloomed in their wake. Entire systems lost coordination. Space stations reported catastrophic failures of thought and language. Ships emerged from hyperspace with their crews aged into ash. Religious sects turned on one another, believing they had been abandoned by the creators. And then, silence. But the damage was done. The great unity of the Alzenorian Confederacy fractured. Old rivalries resurfaced. Trade routes that once carried gravitanium and peace were now patrolled by warships plated in chronotite and hate. It was then that the planet Ion, long jealous of Gnosis and its influence within the Confederacy, acted. The Ionian ascendancy, led by a cold-minded Zinlad, known only as Zur-Tsilor, launched a preemptive strike against Gnosis. Entire continents burned in high-orbit bombardments. Cryovaults, filled with the genetic archives of 1,000 years, were lost in seconds. The famed oracles of Gnosis, whose voices were said to harmonize with solar winds, were silenced forever. The fall of Gnosis shattered the Alzenorian dream. In the wake of its destruction, countless outposts, fleets, and trade guilds chose independence over allegiance. The floating cities of Alcenos, once the pride of the Confederacy, became isolated fortresses or drifting tombs. One by one, the pillars of a galactic golden age collapsed. But even in darkness, fragments of light remained. A new class of scholars arose, those who abandoned politics and doctrine and instead turned to preservation. Nagi, once a xenoanthropologist of religious mythos, became the foremost voice of this quiet movement. She and her partner, Electura, fled to the outer rings of Lanumi, where they began to record everything, from the last transmissions of Gnosis to the whispered songs of refugee ships. There, among ruins and data vaults, they whispered a new name for their movement, the last Codex. And so it was that in the dying embers of Alzenoria's golden age, the seeds of remembrance were planted. The age of ascension had passed, the veil had been glimpsed, and the price of greatness had come due. But the stars still watched. Act 3, The Shattered Confederacy. By the time the solar calendar struck the waning years of 3C1.4, the Alzenorian Confederacy had become a phantom of itself. The once fluid networks of knowledge exchange and mutual defense decayed into quarrels over stardust and symbolism. The Grand Council, once held aboard the spiraling crystalline tower of Altacrit Station, now echoed only with static and silence. Only fragments of the council remained, splinters of power clinging to obsolete titles and forgotten decrees. Planets began to wall themselves off behind private fleets. Zimmit, once the sanctum of priestly insight, grew quiet, its archives sealed, its skies patrolled by drones of ancient code. It was here, amid its monolithic temples, that the last high priest of Zimet composed a simple line, etched into the gravitanium walls in light that only the dying could see. We were not betrayed. We were undone by our own magnificence. But elsewhere, Ion flourished. Fueled by conquest, ruthless efficiency, and technologies salvaged from the remains of Gnosis and Lanumi, the Ionian Empire began its expansion. No longer did it move as one among many. It marched as a single will, dressed in null iron and bearing the banner of dominance. Ionian warships, their hulls shimmering with vortexium distortion fields, swept through the inner rim of the Lyria region, annexing station after station, planet after planet. At the height of its power, Ion proclaimed itself the sole heir of Alzenoria. They claimed the title of the old confederacy, though they wore it like stolen skin. Their Zinlat rulers boasted dominion from Raporia to the edge of the Zenla expansion region. Their fleets floated like crucifixes across shattered orbits. But despite their grandeur, there was no peace. For the more they conquered, the more their enemies multiplied. And among these enemies emerged something unexpected. From the dust-choked ruins of Nogunia, a long-forgotten planet orbiting the lower crescent of Zenoria's southern arm, rose a figure whose name had not yet stirred the tongues of stars. A war orphan, a child of scattered bloodlines and unrecognized divinity. His birth name is lost, a whisper that never found breath. But the name he would be given, by enemies, by allies, by time itself, was Lajazin. In the centuries to come, the galaxy would know him by a different title, Zenzer Zila, Emperor of the fleets of Zenla, ruler of all, sovereign of the Nogunian Empire. He was not born into empire. He carved it from forgotten stone and silence. Legends tell that he was found drifting in a polished gold stasis cradle, hidden in a dormant portal gate, perhaps abandoned, perhaps sent by design. He was raised not by priests or scholars, but by a lone scavenger pirate named Azi Elku, who recognized in the boy's gaze a gaze that stared back through centuries. By the time Lajazin reached his 3rd century of life, still youthful by Alzenorian standards, he had already united the war bands of Nogunia under one banner. But he did not stop there. He studied the Zibunubi law archives, deciphered the fractured codes of the ancient Tyzinian data vaults, and recreated a vision of empire that had not been seen since the Alzenorian peak. But he was no mere imitator. Zenzer Zila's genius was not in restoration, it was in reinvention. He abandoned the ancient hierarchies of Zinlat and Zurtat. He dissolved the priesthood's political power, and he established the Nogunian Trium, a governing model based not on bloodline or faith, but on demonstrated cosmic command, battlefield wisdom, temporal insight, and the ability to reshape systems with vision alone. By 3C1.5, Zenzer Zila's fleets, layered with Starforge alloy beneath sleek obsidian cloaks of dusk steel, pierced the ionosphere of Ion itself. The Ionian emperors, caught in ritual and arrogance, could not react fast enough. In a war that lasted only 4 solar weeks, the Ionian Empire collapsed. It was the final death knell of the Alzenorian Confederacy. And as Zila's ship circled the ruins of Altacrit Station, now adrift in solemn silence, he issued the decree that would echo across time. Let the stars bear witness. I claim not the ashes of Alzenoria. I claim the flame it could not hold. Thus began the Nogunian era, a period of relative unity, radical reconstruction, and a philosophical shift that reached even the far ends of the Zen quadrant. The civilizational baton, once so firmly held by the Alzenorians, had passed. But the memory of Alzenoria did not die. Across secret observatories, aboard hidden archive ships, in ruins buried beneath the moons of Lanumi, voices continued their quiet vigil. Agi Nagi, Elictura, and their followers, keepers of the last codex, recorded not just history, but meaning. They chronicled not only what was done, but why. Not just the fall, but the warning. Power unbalanced is prophecy fulfilled, they wrote. Where history forgets, myth awakens. And where myth breathes, so too does destiny. In the wake of the shattered Confederacy, amid the ashes of celestial arrogance, a different kind of empire stirred, not of ships, but of memory. And so the question remained, had Alzenoria truly died, or merely transformed into something the stars had yet to understand? Act 4. Of Memory and Flame. Ages passed. Civilizations rose and fell like breath upon frost. The Nogunian Empire, mighty as it was, eventually succumbed to entropy's slow march. New factions emerged in the Zen quadrant, some noble, others ravenous, each shaping the regions of Lyria, Raporia, and beyond with their own designs. Yet even as the stars shifted, even as the languages changed, and the records blurred, one truth remained. The story of Alzenoria refused to die. It began with whispers, rumors of temporal distortions near the abandoned lanes of the Zunlir Drift, merchant fleets passing the silent corridors of Zimit reported encountering flickers of cities in orbit, phantoms of floating metropolises, impossibly intact and vanishing without trace. Elsewhere, near the forgotten moon temples of Lanumi, quantum beacons long thought dead suddenly sang to passing probes, with voices encoded in Alzenorian cuneiform. The scholars of Zenla could no longer ignore the signals. A renaissance of rediscovery swept across the Lyria region. It was not an empire that led it, but a movement. Archival ships, scientific expeditions, and independent explorers converged on long-abandoned coordinates, digging beneath layers of cosmic dust and gravitational distortion. And what they found changed everything. In the remains of Alcenos Theta, a once floating capital city thought to have vaporized in the Ionian Wars, researchers uncovered a databank pulsing with residual chronotite energy. Within it, scholars accessed a time-looped echo of a moment from 3C1.2, a living recording preserved in quantum recursion. The data showed priests, engineers, artists, and warriors, not at war, but in awe. They stood together, gathered before an altar of rotating star maps and weeping celestial projections. The subject of their focus? A projection titled, "The Veil Beyond the Veil." Its meaning was obscured, likely encoded only for Alzenorian minds, but the recording was unmistakably reverent. It portrayed not a threat, but a transition, a planned step, perhaps, or a surrender to something greater. Other relics soon followed. The buried archives of Elzina held massive ledger tablets of the Alzenorian blockchain, a data chain so refined it recorded not only civic transactions but conscious experiences. Scientists stood stunned as they accessed emotional states, visual memories, even whispered prayers from Alzenorian citizens long perished. And at the edge of the Zen quadrant, deep within the rings of a collapsed moon, a lost ship emerged, its name etched in Ethereum beneath layers of gravitanium armor. Zizila's Dream. It had belonged to Queen Zizila, warrior matriarch of the pre-Confederate age, a figure of legend even in her own time, the ship contained a time capsule of cosmic proportions. Not weaponry, not riches, but beliefs, documents, sculpture, psionic relics, and most importantly, a manifesto. We were born not to dominate, but to understand. If ever we falter, may the cosmos remember this. Alzenoria is not a place. It is a question, unanswered, yet immortal. These discoveries reshaped Zenla. Alzenorian culture experienced a rebirth, not as a state, but as a symbol. Scholars retranslated their works. Artists painted sprawling murals of the floating cities. Philosophers quoted the ancient priesthoods. Whole generations of colonists in fringe systems chose Alzenorian names for their ships, their settlements, and even their children. But not all welcomed the revival. There were those who feared the lessons unlearned. Alzenoria, they reminded the galaxy, had not merely fallen from power. It had imploded beneath its own impossible grandeur. Beneath its shimmering technologies and cultural feats had been inequity, arrogance, and an elite blind to its own disconnection from the stars. Yet others disagreed. For them, Alzenoria's story was not a cautionary tale, but a call, not to repeat its fall, but to pursue its final dream, the mysterious destiny glimpsed in the veil beyond the veil. What if Alzenoria had not perished, but ascended? What if its greatest minds had cracked the code, not of war or power, but of existence itself? These dreamers began gathering quietly under the banner of an old term pulled from the last codex, Lanumians, those who remember forward. They did not seek to revive Alzenoria. Instead, they sought to become what it had hinted at, and in the dark corners of the Lyria region, they whispered, "We do not rebuild the past. We answer the question it left behind." Act 5, the final cipher. There is a point in all great histories where record fades into rumor and rumor into dream. For Alzenoria, that point has long passed. Yet amid the ruins and rediscoveries, the stories that once pulsed beneath the surface now surge forth, undeniable and defiant. They do not claim truth in the academic sense, but in the deeper, more ancient way, a cosmic truth, one carried not by facts but by memory. Among the last transmissions recorded from the outer Alzenorian satellites, those silent watchers that once served the lanes of Zunlir and Harzlir, was a simple burst of data, encoded in layers of recursive syntax and Alzenorian cuneiform. The message was only decrypted in recent centuries. It read, "We have completed the arc." No one knew what it meant, not until explorers, guided by lanular traditions and gravimetric anomalies, uncovered a structure, not on a planet, but inside a stable anomaly beyond Nurnurla. It was a hollowed singularity, a cradle carved in the eye of a gravitational storm. There, encased in null iron shellwork and tethered to the quantum fabric of local space-time, they found what became known only as the Arc of Ascension. It was not a ship, it was not a city, it was a mechanism, not one built for movement, but for transference. Within its mirrored halls, explorers found no bodies, no data archives, no evidence of struggle or war, only rows of crystalline chambers, each inscribed with the same symbol, an Alzenorian glyph, meaning both departure and return. Some theorized it was a failed evacuation vessel. Others said it was a temple, built to honor the final breath of a dying people. But the Lanulars, the memory keepers, disagreed. In the codices of Agi Nagi, an obscure note had been found, often overlooked, a single verse translated roughly from an earlier poetic fragment stored on Zimit to transcend, one must cease to war against time. We step beyond the veil, not to flee, but to rejoin. We are the echoes of what was, becoming what will be. The implications were staggering. The Arc of Ascension was not an escape. It was a transition gate, a vessel of mass migration not across space, but across dimensional boundaries. Alzenoria did not fall in fire and blood. It left. Not all at once, and not entirely, but in measured phases, planned centuries in advance, using the energy of wormholes, quantum fields, and their final resource, memory. Their technology had advanced beyond mere weaponry or star travel. They had begun manipulating the architecture of existence itself, folding thought into matter, encoding identity into vibration, crafting a way to shed physical form without death. In the words of one recovered priestly script, the body is a shell, the stars are mirrors, the soul a signal. To be free is to sink. And so, over time, the Alzenorians transferred themselves, first into quantum lattices, then into harmonic resonance fields, then perhaps into a realm of pure waveform, a plane beyond time, beyond entropy, and the mystery deepens. Because still, in the darkest sectors of Lyria, unmapped vessels are encountered, ships of unknown origin, bearing no energy signatures, drifting in silence, but composed of xanthrosite, vortexium, and chronotite, materials no civilization in the current era can replicate. Inside them are no crew, only light, humming, waiting. One such vessel, recovered near the fractal rift, played a single audio pattern when activated, a voice, elegant, neutral, unmistakably ancient, spoke in old Alzenorian dialect. You have remembered us. Therefore, we are with you. Today, the Lanulars believe the Alzenorians are not gone, but merely watching, listening from beyond the known vibrations of this universe, waiting for the rest of us to ask the same question they once did. What lies beyond knowledge? What is the shape of truth when no longer bound to matter? What happens when memory becomes motion? So ends the first chapter of the Starborne Codex, a chronicle of Alzenoria, a civilization that burned brighter than 1,000 stars, not because it sought conquest, but because it sought understanding. Its fall was not defeat. Its silence, not absence. Its mystery, not unsolved, but unfolding. We do not mourn Alzenoria, so, say the Lanulars. We listen for it. And if you, listener, ever find yourself beneath unfamiliar stars, if you feel a warmth in your bones when ancient ruins whisper, if you dream of cities that float and gods that teach, then remember, you too are part of this story. The stars are ready to speak again.